Hello and good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this really important webinar on on US Investment Promotion Activity Fund. Now, we all know that two things are discussed most widely in Pakistan: how to get to grants and foreign direct investment. So today, the conversation will be focused primarily on how USAID, through its development strategy, is contributing to economic stability in Pakistan, and how, through the USAID investment promotion activities, grantees can access up to Rs 20 million for enhanced trade and investment between Pakistan and US businesses. Today, we see that we have an early morning session and so many participants, which is very heartening. And apart from the participants, we have a very esteemed panel. So I would like to introduce the esteemed panel before we can go into the conversation. We have Mr. Stephen Berlinguette, Director, Economic Growth and Agriculture, USAID Mission. He has over 20 plus years of experience of managing business affairs and government policy in emerging markets and development countries. His area of expertise is trade policy and market access, economic analysis and market research, investment environment and regulatory reform, as well as transactions negotiations. He has an MS in Southeast Asia Studies and International Economics from the Johns Hopkins University. Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining us. And we hear that you're new to Pakistan, so I hope that you really enjoy your time here. Next, we have Ms. Afsheen Shakoor. She is a private sector specialist for USAID Mission. She has extensive experience in micro and small business finance, market research, demand and supply analysis, business planning, financial modeling, project management, risk management, and capacity building. We also have Mr. Farooq Mehboob Khan with us, who is the Chief of Party USAID IPA. He has 25 years of experience in managing SME development, competitive enhancement, and business enabling environment activities in Pakistan. He has worked in senior position with the government of Pakistan and various donor-funded projects, including Chief of Party on the 35 million Pakistan Small Medium Enterprise Activity since 2017, and 5 years as Value Chain Development Competent Lead on Pakistan Firms Project. And then we have Mr. Usman Kirmani, who is a Senior Grants Manager for the USAID IPA. He has extensive experience in grant administrations for grants under contracts, cooperative agreements, and capacity building on donors' compliance, maintaining effective collaboration with the US state departments and other donors. So all of those joining us online, just to tell you that there will be a formal Q&A session with the participants and with the panelists. And then we'll be moving forward with a Q&A session if time is, of course, for a certain period of time. And also an email address will be provided for a detailed conversation post the webinar if there are questions, if there are queries. So moving to you, Stephen, can you please provide us an overview of USAID's current development cooperation strategy for Pakistan? And how is it helping foster a more economically stable and prosperous country?
Well, thank you for the question. And before I get into the details of that question, I want to extend a special thank you to Ali, Paklanch, and everyone who is on the call together with us today. We were delighted to meet Ali, I guess, 2 months ago now, if memory serves. And we've had some very interesting and productive conversations with him around ways that we could work together. And I want to thank him for all of those great conversations and for the great ideas that we're hearing from Paklanch. We're excited about working with you. So thank you very much again for having us with you today. I would like to start by giving an overview of USAID Pakistan's work with enterprises in this country. And I want to, the point that I'd really like to make, and the point that I'm hoping that everyone on the call today leaves with, is that yes, USAID Pakistan does have grants programs, and we do support access to finance activities, but we also offer a whole portfolio of services for small and medium enterprises in this country. So it's not just grants, it's many different types of support, and we'll get into that a little bit today. So to start with, USAID Pakistan does this kind of work. We support Pakistani enterprises because we see the promise. We see the huge opportunities that are in this country, in this market. We see the same opportunities that you do. So the startup ecosystem in Pakistan, there's undeniable energy among Pakistani startups. They're everywhere. And I knew about the Pakistani startup sector well before I arrived here. This country's endowments in terms of market size, in terms of comparative advantages, resources, very compelling. It's a huge market with a young and ambitious population. So for us, this is a recipe for growth. So USAID, we'd like to see Pakistan as being one of the world's fastest growing economies. And in our opinion, there's no reason why that shouldn't be happening starting now. And for us, it starts with increasing trade and investment. So a bit about our strategy. Our goal is to help position the private sector to lead Pakistan towards growth and development objectives. Overall, I would say our goal as a U.S. government development agency here is to help this market find business solutions to Pakistan's development challenges. And we work directly with businesses that have ideas around these solutions. And we want to help this country's entrepreneurs profit, grow their businesses, and very importantly, hire workers. So that comes from business expansion. So getting to the how do we do this? We work in a couple of, or several key areas. So we work on business environment. We do advisory services. We do finance. And finally, we help build linkages across this country's businesses. So business environment. We work to help the government of Pakistan design and implement policy and regulations that improve the business environment, make it easier to do business in this country. So one example is that USAID was instrumental in helping advance Pakistan's small and medium enterprise law. We had a big support role in getting that law across the finish line. Second, advisory services. So USAID and our implementing partners, we help individual companies, especially companies that have found that sweet spot, which is, again, finding business solutions to this country's development challenges. So for example, this could be a company that has found a new way to grow and distribute agricultural products, for example. That's one of this country's development challenges, is growing the agriculture sector. Or another example could be we directly support women-led businesses. Again, another development challenge in Pakistan is bringing more women into this economy. Another example could be we work with healthcare or education startups that are addressing market failures. We want to support these kinds of enterprises because healthcare and education are development challenges in Pakistan. So what do? We help these companies. We would help improve planning, operations, help these companies find efficiencies and just improve their profile and the way they do business. We help companies identify new business lines and problems to solve. We help companies identify new opportunities. We help companies ready themselves for investment. And I really want to highlight this last point. For example, if there are investors on this call that have identified companies that have great potential, but those companies aren't quite at the level of readiness for investment that they need to be at, come and talk to us, because we have been doing business development services in Pakistan for many years. This is the stuff that, this is what we do. Next point, finance. So we help companies find finance and find investors. The US government, we have partnerships with financial institutions in Pakistan, and our goal is to help these institutions identify bankable companies for investment. And so, yes, we do have grants programs here in Pakistan. They are not nearly as well capitalized as private financial institutions are. And so that's why, while we do have small grants programs, we also work to help do matchmaking between companies and financial institutions. But we do have a grants program that helps young companies find their footing. And again, in our network here in Pakistan, we have many other partners that are looking for good Pakistani enterprises to support. Finally, linkages. We strive to help bridge the gaps between Pakistani entrepreneurs and American entrepreneurs. So our goal here is to find opportunities to link companies from both countries in such a way that facilitates trade and investment. And so I touched upon this earlier. Again, the overlap between business opportunities and development challenges. So we are especially interested in climate change, agriculture, women's entrepreneurship. We're interested in the energy sector, and we're interested in health and education. So final point, and I'll wrap up. So the US-Pakistan bilateral relationship is changing. So for a very long time, we have been predominantly focused on security. It's not the case anymore. We're opening a new chapter now, and economic growth, trade, investment, entrepreneurship, these are very high on the list of the US government's priorities for the relationship. So I think we all share the goal of private sector-led growth in Pakistan. And we also share this group's vision for innovation and entrepreneurship. This country is too compelling to ignore. And I think that the solution to Pakistan's growth and development is with all of the people here on this call. You are the solution. We'd like to help get you there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephen. Very encouraging to see that the direction is now economic reform, economic stability, and then leading to development. All those challenges that we have, the development challenges, it's very linked to the economic stability that we're talking about. So thank you for this really detailed overview. And also, you talked about the promise and opportunity in the Pakistani market and the energy that you see here. So even though you've covered a little bit on how USAID Pakistan is helping promote bilateral trade and investment, do you want to say a few more lines on it? Because this is specifically what this grant fund that we'll be talking about today is about.
More specifics on the grants, is that right?
About the bilateral trade and investment and the efforts that USAID will be putting in. Like, of course, you've talked about how there is a shift towards, now economic cooperation and bilateral trade and investment.
Well, I actually am ready to pass the mic, and I have Farouk, who is here with us, who is perfectly positioned to discuss some of these questions.
Okay.
I think you've heard enough from me at this point.
Yeah. So thank you, Stephen. And also, There were so many, while you were talking, there were so many questions on which policy did you enable as law. It was this, for all those asking, it was the small and medium enterprise policy. So that was the one that through the USAID SMEA program that was done. Now we move to Afsheen. Afsheen, what are some of the key investment and trade related challenges that you see Pakistan facing today? And how do you see USAID Pakistan's various economic growth initiatives helping to address these challenges?
Thank you, Gul. And first of all, good morning, everyone, and good afternoon and good evening from for the people who are joining from the rest of the world. So very happy to join the webinar today. And one would think that with a population of more than 215 million and the GDP of which goes north to the north of 346 billion, one would expect that Pakistan has all the right fundamentals and all the prerequisites which would make it an attractive destination for foreign investment. But somehow, the business enabling environment, the ecosystem of Pakistan, the entrepreneurship ecosystem or the investment ecosystem of Pakistan has been lagging behind its regional competitors and the global competitors. We know that right next door, the neighbors were able to attract investment to the tune of billions. So, despite the relatively very open investment policy, what has been challenging for Pakistan? To begin with, I mean, the security situation. One would argue that it has been improving over the recent past, but still we have challenges related to security. Just yesterday, we were talking to the business community in Pakistan, and they alluded to the fact that the business climate, the problems with the disharmonization within the federal and provincial, regulatory requirements of these businesses. These are hindrances or stumbling blocks for these businesses to make investments in Pakistan. The poor intellectual property rights is a big problem that Pakistan generally faces. The dispute resolution process sometimes take more than years to resolve for these. And these are things that basically, are not very conducive for these businesses to operate in Pakistan. All that said, it's not all gloomy. It's not all, gray for investors in Pakistan. There are, of course, benefits for people who are interested or attracted to choose Pakistan as a foreign direct investment destination. However, there are certain things that are required. Although things are moving in the right direction, we have progress in transitioning to a market-driven dollar exchange rate. The progress has not been to the likeness of the investors, but Pakistan is moving in the right direction. But these are some of the challenges that still are present for Pakistan. And we being the USAID, being the donor community, you being the private sector, the people present in this call, are set to address these challenges and put Pakistan in the right direction. Your second question was regarding, what USAID economic growth has been doing in terms of, addressing the growth challenges for Pakistan. Although Stephen has spoken very detailed in detail about all these programs, but I'm going to, touch upon different themes that we have been working on in the Office of Economic Growth and Agriculture with USAID. So one of the foremost activity that I've been, intimately involved with was the small and medium enterprise activity. In that, we started off with working with the government of Pakistan in improving the business enabling environment. So the policies like SME policy for Pakistan, investment, policies at the provincial level after the 18th Amendment, which was a requirement. So we supported the government of Pakistan in, improving all those policies to make sure that there's a level playing field for all the people who are interested in either making investment in Pakistan or, doing business in Pakistan, generally speaking. We have directly supported ease of doing business in Pakistan through directly contributing to the World Bank's ease of doing business indicators. A lot of improvement was seen in the last ranking that was reported by World Bank. Pakistan improved by, I think, more than plus 20 positions, if I'm not mistaken. Then, in the similar activity, we were working directly with the SMEs to improve their competitiveness in terms of providing them access to technology, providing them access to markets, so promoting the digitalization within these SMEs, promoting access to finance, promoting e-commerce for these entities. We work with a lot of women-led businesses to make sure that they are financially and they are operating in a financially, sustainable manner. Then we worked, we also provided grants to, spur innovation as well as growth of these SMEs. One of the biggest challenges in Pakistan is that SMEs reach a certain level of growth and then they are stuck at that level and don't grow beyond that. So that is sort of, the portfolio in the economic growth SME side. I'm not going to speak about investment promotion activity. I'll let Farooq talk about that in detail. But then on the trade side, we do a lot of work in supporting and trade rationalization, a rationalization of tariffs, supporting the government of Pakistan to promote regional trade, to make Pakistan, improve its exports within the region and internationally. So we work on that. One of the biggest challenge for private sector in Pakistan, and especially the entrepreneurs, our audience for today, is access to finance. So we have partnered with multiple banks to provide a credit guarantee facility so they are able to lend to the SMEs and the entrepreneurs to the tune of $46 million. That's the amount of increase in credit access to for these sectors. So these are apart from our agriculture portfolio, these are things that we have been working on. I'll be happy to answer any questions, but at this point in time, I'm gonna give the mic back to you to ask any further questions.
Thank you,
move
Afsheen.
on.
Thank you for this really detailed, conversation about what kind of grants you have already given, what kind of work is already being done, and especially about how it is now addressing these specific challenges that Pakistan faces. Moving to you, Farooq, now, you will, as the chief of party, can you please provide us with an overview of what this investment promotion activity is? Which are the key objectives? How is it, linking to the key challenges of Pakistan to address it? And then if you allow me, I'll just put the next question to you as well, because there are a few questions on it also in the chat that I see. That are there any specific interventions that this project has for women-led businesses and women entrepreneurs? Because we have traditionally seen, women struggling with this kind of grant managements and even accessing these kinds of grants. So Farooq, over to you.
Thank you very much, Gulalai, and thank you very much, Ali Fahad and the Park Launch team for giving us this time to talk about this very exciting new activity called USAID Pakistan Investment Promotion Activity. Basically, the primary objective of this activity is to promote foreign direct investment into the country and also to promote bilateral trade between the US and Pakistan. So these being the main objectives of the project, we are structured in the form of three separate or mutually complementing components. One is, as Stephen talked about, we work with the government of Pakistan to help remove some of the pain points that Pakistani companies and foreign investors face in the country because of policies which are either dated or are not conducive to the growth of these companies and the objectives of investment promotion in the country. So we will be working with primarily Board of Investment at the federal level. We'll also be working with the provincial boards of investment and trade. And we would also be working with State Bank of Pakistan, the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, and also perhaps the Competition Commission of Pakistan. So wherever the footprint of these pain points the so-called pain points that I just referred to, wherever they are, with the help of the private sector, of course, we will be identifying the problems and then looking for solutions with the help of the private sector, trade associations, other organizations which are working in these areas. But also, of course, keeping all this work in line with the development agenda of the government of Pakistan as well. The other two components, we are directly working with the Pakistani and firms in the country, and also looking to create linkages with the companies around the world for investment promotion and for bilateral trade improvement in the US. So how we do it? I mean, this is probably the question now very high on the agenda of all the listeners. How we do it. So Stephen earlier referred to the BDS process, the business development services that we provide. So we'll be working with trade and investment experts and providing their services to companies who are in the process of either striking a deal or have reached close to a deal with an international company, and also creating linkages for companies who are not that advanced in this process, both for trade promotion as well as for investment promotion. These services could be investment advisory services, transaction advisory services. These could be certifications which are required by companies to break into the US markets. This could also be services for linkage creation between investors, between trading partners also. And the third component that Usman will later provide you more details about is the grants program. So now the grants program, we are fresh off the back of successes that Afsheen earlier talked about in the investment, the small and medium enterprise activity. We've given close to 150 grants there to improve the business processes, to improve the way Pakistani SMEs do business, their marketing activities, providing them access to technology and all those things to improve their existing businesses, and also provide innovative solutions to the problems that the SMEs are facing in Pakistan. Similarly, these grants will help the companies to finalize their deal-making process for investment, bringing investment into the country, and also to break into the US market to promote their trade-related activities. So the way this grants program works is that we provide some of the capital, while we expect that the rest will be raised by the companies on their own. So these grants are given through a highly competitive process. We get thousands of expressions of interest, and out of those, hundreds are filtered down to for more further evaluations, and let's say less than 100 would go into the process of actual evaluation for grant, for being given the grants eventually. So this is how the process works. We are very transparent in our efforts to reach out to the right people for the disbursement of these grants, to involve people from the preferred sectors that we have. We have 4 of them. There was a question that I saw that which sectors would we be focusing on. So there are priority sectors, but we will not be saying no to any application which is good enough to be considered from any other sector also. So we have information and communication technology. We have manufacturing, which obviously is a big basket. It could include any sector which is involved in the process of manufacturing. We have agri-processing, and then we have hospitality and tourism also. So we believe, based on our analysis which went into the designing of this project, that these sectors have a high potential for investment, bringing in investment to the country, and also to create an environment for, first of all, and then linkages for trade promotion between the US and Pakistan. So I hope I've answered your questions, Gulilai. And if I have left any,
just one question, Farooq Saab, because this is like a recurring question coming in the chats, and also something that a lot of people would be interested in. That, of course, you said that there are 4 priorities areas, but are there specific initiatives for women-led businesses and entrepreneurs, or is it just if you can just give a little bit detail on that as well?
There are no specific interventions, but all of our interventions are done with being sensitive to the problems that women face in terms of accessing the resources required to grow their businesses. So this is a cross-cutting theme that we'll have in all our activities. We'll do our best to involve them in, we like to call it positive discrimination wherever possible, where that women, not just women, but also youth and transgenders are also going to be high on our agenda, to include them in the process of being exposed to the processes, if not actually making it to the final stage. Because that is going to be, I would not I would say that it is going to be highly competitive in nature, that process, But we'll do everything possible to include all these groups into the process.
So for all those repeatedly asking about it, gender and inclusion is a cross-cutting agenda. But you have to have a very, very stable and a very, very good proposal for that, and for anybody to be applying for that. So thank you, Farokh Saab, for this detail, and also congratulations on doing some really good work with the SME policy, which has been a hallmark for a lot of, the work that is being currently done under the small and medium enterprises. So USA does have that, as Stephen mentioned, some good work behind it to be able to build on it when it comes to grant management and other work. Now moving to Usman. Usman, since you are the senior grants manager for the program, and you will be running an entire presentation, if I understand, on how this grant program is going to work, what are the opportunities available, and the most important one, what is the eligibility criteria and application process. So over to you, Usman, because this is probably a very important presentation for all those who have joined to listen and watch us today.
Thank you so much, Gulale, and thank you to the Park Launch team and the members who have joined so far. I can see an interesting communication going on, quite a good engagement. And I believe that after this orientation presentation, I hope most of the questions would be answered. We will have the question and answer session as well, and I'll share with you the email address from where anybody or the potential grant applicants can actually share their questions. So like Farokh has already introduced about the IPF fund, before I begin with the presentation, I just wanted to share an interesting fact that through our previous grants program, Challenge Fund in Smes that Afsheen has spoken about, we had found that over the 6 years of the implementation period, we had provided 141 grants of a total worth of $7.5 million US, and the 70% of the total grants portfolio were the ones who had already participated in these pre-application orientation sessions. So the information that I'm going to share with everyone is from the request for application template and guidelines that we have already shared. And I'll be highlighting some of the key areas with you, which a potential applicant may probably miss to notice or register. So I'll skip the orientation about the overall project and go straight into IPF fund component. So like Farokh has earlier shared, through IPF fund, we actually intend to buy down the risk of a Pakistani firm who is either into a matchmaking to get an international investment approved in the form of FDI, or has got a potential to create more linkages with US and Pakistan bilateral trade. So it's the overall size of IPF fund is $3.3 million US. That's been spread for 5 years. We'll have multiple rounds, at least 2 rounds per year. So like Farokh had already shared, we have got 4 priority sectors, namely information, communication, and technology. So ICT as a sector itself, and also as an enabling sector for any other sector, would be eligible to apply. We have got agricultural, technology, and business processing. We have got manufacturing, Manufacturing has got a bigger scope. It includes all sorts of sectors that are included to manufacturing sectors, such as textile, light engineering, and many more. We have tourism and hospitality sector as well. So having said that, we are not pretty much fixated about these 4 sectors, but if we get a good applicant, a good application that has got that could actually achieve one of the 2 core objective of IPF fund, one is to mobilize private sector investment to get the FDI closed, and the other one is to have our scale-up linkages with US counterparts, so to increase the US-Pakistan bilateral trade. So whenever we wish to apply for some sort of grant funding, it's always essential to find out what are the key target, what are the key indicators of that specific program that are being agreed with the donor. So allow me to share it with you, and then you can actually attribute your expected results towards the key target that we have for USAID IPF. So you can see on the screen, we are actually planning to have a 40 million worth of incremental US-Pakistan bilateral trade, and this includes exports and imports. So while you are designing your grant application around the US-Pakistan bilateral trade program, you need to focus on how your expected results could have the multiplier effect that could essentially contribute towards the 40 million worth of trade that we have actually set ourselves a target. The other one related to the FDI is that first we need to mobilize 25 million US dollar worth of private sector investment, PSI, in order to get a 75 million US dollar worth of FDI approved. So if you are designing a grants intervention, you are proposing activities about that, you need to make sure that you will have enough PSI that through that you will be capable to get the FDI approved. So the expected results that we get actually contribute towards these 2 major key indicators. We have got 3 grant funding streams. So for now, we have just advertised 2 of them, and we'll have tech transfer grant advertised probably in November and next year. So the first one we have as a grant funding stream that we have advertised right now is FDI grants. Through FDI grants, we will have a special focus to catalyze potential matchmaking of a Pakistani firm. So let me explain this to you through an example. For instance, if you are an IT firm and you've got this capacity, or you're already in talks or what we call a deal stage with an investor. So for instance, there's a Pakistani firm working in IT sector and in talks with, let's say, Microsoft, and there's a condition to the additional funding from Microsoft in the form of FDI that, look, you need to have your overall development to a certain scale so that we could fund you with this amount of funding in FDI. So in order to buy down the risk of that Pakistani IT firm or any other firm who needs to scale up its operation to a certain level that could be that could agree with the conditions of an FDI investor. So for instance, if there is an overall capacity of private sector investment to get to that level, and that is that may amount to 300 or 400,000 US dollar. So we may buy down your risk through this grant funding, which is equivalent to 100,000 US dollar, and it will then have a Kickstarter impact. It will actually catalyze more private sector investment so that you can expedite your ambitions towards getting 1 million or 500,000 or 2 million maybe worth of FDI for your organization. So the overall size of grant for both the FDI and US-Pakistan bilateral trade grant is up to 20 million PKR. So now I'll share about the US-Pakistan bilateral trade grant. In US-Pakistan trade grant, these grants will be awarded to organizations, businesses who have got some linkages with the US-based counterparts. So they can trade, they can export, or they can open up Pakistani market for the US-based merchandise or services. So for instance, if there's a company that's working in manufacturing sector or any other sector, maybe the textile comes as a low-hanging fruit because as we see our previous 3 years export performance, exports has got a lot of potential in terms of US-Pakistan bilateral trade on the textile side. So for instance, if there's an organization or a business that has got the linkages and through the grant support, they can expand their capacity, or if there is a need of some sort of technology transfer or some international certifications that may be included as part of the grant, or some other proposed intervention that can lead to an expansion of US-Pakistan bilateral trade. So for instance, right now, if an organization is working with 1 or 2 vendors, and with this grant support, they will have this opportunity to either scale that to a certain level, or they may have many more US-based vendors on the list. So the tech transfer grant, these are not advertised yet. It will have a smaller amount of the overall funding threshold, but it will be much more quicker than the other 2 in terms of implementation. And we will be getting application on the rolling basis. So tech transfer grants are intended to quickly empower private sector firms to build their capacity to meet the US market standards and requirement. So we'll explain when we launch tech transfer grant, we'll have pre-application orientation sessions and webinar around that. So let me share with you the overall grant cycle so that you would have an idea about the expected timelines, what would be the grants period like, the geographic coverage. It was one of the questions in the chat box as well. So on the eligibility side, these grants are open for firms that are legally registered in Pakistan. We do have some desirable elements attached to each of the funding stream as well. I will actually share that with you later on. The total funding size, as I have just shared, is about 20 million, is up to 20 million PKR. It actually doesn't mean that you would that we would expect that you apply for the maximum ceiling. I would say be reasonable in your ask, because we have got, as I'll explain in the evaluation side. So we'll have the industry people reviewing that, and if the ask is inflated or it's too much of an ask or it's not making the value for money, then the overall ranking may get lower. So the implementation of the proposed grant period is up to 8 months. We are open to all regions across Pakistan. There is no certain quota on any sector, any geographic locality. The deadline for submitting the grant application is September 15th, 2022. So if you haven't received the EOI yet, what you can do is to send out an inquiry to IPA Fund at pakistanipa.com. You will receive an online form that's an expression of interest form. Once you submit that form, we will get you the RFA guidance along with the templates that I'll also be explaining it to you now. We only accept online submissions on the same address, that is ipffund@pakistanipa.com. Just to quickly walk you through the grant cycle. So it starts with the call for application. In this case, we had this EOI. We are conducting pre-application orientation sessions. At the like of this webinar, we are also holding in-person pre-application orientation sessions. We had great attendance in Lahore, in Karachi. We have the next sessions in Islamabad. You can get and enroll. You can get the schedule and get yourself enrolled for the pre-application orientation session. That's available on the EOI link. So once the applications are being we only accept online submissions. This then leads towards the evaluation of grant application. So once we get all of the application, we do a basic eligibility criteria on these grant application. We have got consultants on board who would be the leaders in terms of the in the sectors that are related to the grant applications. They themselves are business leaders, and they themselves have got an entrepreneurial experience of evaluating such applications. So once the evaluation is done, I'll share the evaluation criteria with you as we move on. We actually rank all of the applications that we get and are eligible for technical evaluation in a manner that we just select the top rank applicants for the final pitch sessions. So we do not outrightly accept or reject any of the grant application. So within a given pool that we have, we rank them up based on the evaluation criteria that I'll be sharing it with you. So it will then lead to the pitch session. You will have an opportunity to share your presentation with the pitch session. It will be more of an interactive session. So all of those applicants who are then shortlisted in the final pitch session are then recommended for pre-award risk assessment. So by stage 5, your idea is being evaluated, your proposed activities are being evaluated, and in step 6 and forward, we evaluate or we assess your organization. So that's the area where we go into your location, we assess your organizational capacity, we check the risk assessment over there, and we also provide capacity building initiatives. If you need any sort of support right there through a collective action planning that could increase your risk to from high to low, we always do that. And that's the due diligence because of which you become more bankable, you become more attractive to international investments and to other investment agencies as well. So after this, we work with you on the grant budgets that you have already submitted. We work on to fine-tune the performance-based milestone that we set. We set the deliverables that are mutually agreed upon. After that, we go into the vetting stage. So that's an important stage where the funding threshold crosses $25,000 US. We are bound to get the vetting cleared from the US Embassy. And after that, we actually work on the overall journey since the application till this time, and then we recommend it for award to USAID. So once USAID awards it, we implement the overall implementation through our monitoring with you So you actually implement it on the performance-based milestone that we have already set, and the disbursement are made on the reimbursement basis. So you actually spend your money for a certain milestone, and when our team verifies that, we actually disperse the amount of that milestone to you, and then the award is closed. So just to share with you some of the timelines, so you may have an idea. Solicitation is valid till September 15th. We are running pre-application orientation sessions that will take about 1 to 2 weeks. So overall submission time is up to 6 weeks. The evaluation and combined with the final pitch session, it will take approximately of 4 weeks time accumulatively. And on the pre-award risk assessment and USAID's approval, it may also take additional 6 weeks of time. So what we estimate is that the expected start date of the implementation would be around in December this year. So like I shared that we have got some desirables for an organization who is either interested into FDI or US-Pakistan bilateral trade. But in terms of overall eligibility, we are just looking at legally registered Pakistani firms that can be of any size. And we haven't really kept the age of the organization as an evaluation criteria, because we are mostly focused on the outcomes of the grant implementation that we'll have. So for firms that are applying for the foreign direct investment FDI grants, we expect that they will have some sort of potential collaboration or already in some sort of deal stage, so that through the grant funding, PSI is mobilized, and within the time period of 6 to 8 months, they get very closer, or they may even achieve the FDI. So for achieving the FDI, what we are looking at is to have a binding agreement by the investor and the investee that in the period of this much of time, the amount will be flowing into Pakistan, into that company particularly. For firms having potential for executing the US-Pakistan bilateral trade, we are looking at the linkages, their current linkages, their current potential, and how they can exponentially increase their potential within the US market, or they may help in opening up Pakistani market for the US. And the overall goals and objectives needs to be aligned. So we have got just 2 important core objectives that I've just shared, and I will be repeating that. So that is pinned to your mind when you're working on the grant application. A is to mobilize private sector investment so that you can get foreign direct investment expedited. And the other one is to have linkages within the US market, or you can open up market for US firms in Pakistan. So for ineligible applications, firms and businesses who actually fail to provide the evidences of their registration, or they miss out on sending out any of the important annexes of the grant application package. So what we have actually seen so far, that we just wait for the very last hour, and at that time we may miss out in sending the budget or any other important supporting document. So since we have got a bigger volume of applications, it at times is not doable for us to get back to an applicant. And also, if there are some organizations who are in process of getting registration, or they're not registered, are not eligible to apply for this round. Any entity that have been found to misuse the USAID funds in the past, and any organization that refuses to sign one or all of the required certifications. So these are just like the ones we have as we apply for a US visa, that your organization is not associated with any terrorist or organization or BARD or narcotics related, and also the subcontractors and any other entity that may have a conflict of interest with the grant program are not eligible to apply. So now comes the evaluation criteria. So I'll first explain the evaluation criteria for FDI grants and then the US-Pakistan bilateral trade grant. So we have designed the grant application in a way that it speaks for one or more of these evaluation criteria. The application template is in editable Word form. You can use your creativity to make it more fancy, but make sure that it actually doesn't omit any of the important questions because that would perhaps would impact on the overall evaluation. So the evaluation criteria So as of one of the concerns, one of the questions in the chat box was about the gender and inclusion. So we have put this special focus over here. I'll explain that to you. So economic growth is being the highest of all of the evaluation criteria scoring that we have. So for the first one, for the FDI grants, we'll be looking at FDI potential, ability to materialize international investments. This may include the status or pipeline deal stage. So you need to convince the reviewer within your grants application that how near you are, or how expected it is to be completed. And numbers are extremely important, and you can always share that how you have been engaged to a certain level of investors or VCs maybe, and what are their responses. We also have special interest on the private sector investment. So because we believe that local investment is key to get the FDI approved. So any business and that has got this competitive advantage to increase their investments from abroad, they would essentially require to do some local investments first. So this is where the grants program actually buys down the risk. So we'll see your potential as your own equity or your potential through mobilization of any third-party investment, or be that a bank, to get to a certain level that could expedite the FDI. If you've got any previous demonstrated experience on the FDI received, there could be startups or businesses who would have approved an angel or super angel investment from abroad, or some seed funding maybe, or any other funding. So they need to share the proof. So they will actually get additional 5 score on it. On the innovation and sustainability, we have shared an illustrative definition of it over here, but this is, like I said, it's illustrative. You cannot, I can say, limit the ability of innovation within these 2 sentences. But it could be an innovation to your organization while you adapt this. For instance, if you're working on a completely manual system and now you're going into an online system or more efficient through a technology, or you're using innovative ways of financial structures to mobilize private sector capital, or there's some amount of tech transfer, or there's an environmental sustainability attached to it. So please share these areas with us within the grant application. So business sustainability beyond grant implementation carries 10 score. This is extremely important. So for instance, we get 2 examples of application. And for one of the businesses, the only worry is to run the office expenses, maybe the overheads, the HR cost, or the advertisement cost maybe, and the applicant is not looking beyond the implementation of the grant. And at the same time, if we have got another applicant who is into some sustainable inputs that they have actually provided through the grant funding. For instance, they are doing some IT related or some technology related work that would be perpetual for the business growth. So so comparatively, the one that will have a higher sustainable implementation proposed would get the maximum score and would get the higher chances of getting approved as well. Because down the road, after 6 to 8 months, when the grant funding is plugged out from the system, how would you survive? How would you be able to retain this much of stuff or the overheads? So that needs a lot of attention and your increased competitiveness and productivity as well. So you may have some sort of operational strength in terms of your HR or capability, your experience, or your associations with some clientele that also carry some marks. We have got inclusion for women and youth. So we as an IPA have set ourselves a target of 30%. That's why we had set ourselves a target for women in SMEA project as well, and we had superseded that. And likewise, what we are aspiring in the IPA project as well. So for firms that are owned and run by women and youth. So we've got this tendency that we'll have women participation as a board of director, but she will not be running the business and she'll not be the main decision maker of the business. So that's something that could be of a concern while we evaluate the grant application. So you need to make sure that if for a women-led business, that's a real women-led business with maximum shareholding with the women as well. And also for youth, so youth are defined as people who age below or equal or below 29 years of age. And then firms where women and youth make up most of the employees, probably you can share your organizational structure or hierarchy that could reflect this. Firms whose product or services affect other women or other women-led businesses positively, and firms committed to increase women in the management leadership role. So we have got 15 marks allocated towards the inclusion. I'll move towards the US-Pakistan bilateral trade grants evaluation criteria. So the rest of the innovation and inclusion are almost the same. I'll just speak about the economic growth side of it. So what we are looking at for the US-Pakistan bilateral trade grants is to, you need to include your potential of the linkages with the US-based market, and also vice versa. If you are opening up, if you are actually opening up the market for the US-based firm in Pakistan. I'm sure we have got lots of questions as well, but and if there's time, then I'll also explain the templates to you as well. So we have also kept 25 marks for the potential leverage of PSI, private sector investment. For instance, you have got a certain capacity now, and you need to increase that capacity so that you can get multiple orders. And in order to increase that capacity or to receive a good linkage with the US counterpart, you would need private sector investment. So that's where the IPF fund, grant funding for US-Pakistan trade grant, would buy down your risk as part of that PSI, and you will be mobilizing the rest of it. So there's also a possibility of getting the FDI potential if there is, so you can include that. For instance, there could be US-based firm who is also interested into investing into your company, probably to scale the operations because they may have a requirement for a larger scale of orders. So that would be eventually regarded as FDI. So you can always include that. For the rest of innovation and sustainability and women and youth inclusion, these are almost the same as we have just shared earlier. I've got some 22 minutes left. I'll just skim through the next of the slides. So the most important thing to note over here is that the award, the type of grant agreement that we do is known as fixed amount award agreement. And so it's always wise to keep your multiple milestones included so that you have got a good cash flow. We are pretty much efficient in reimbursement of the costs that have been incurred by the grantee. So as soon as we verify those deliverables, we disperse the cost. And we do also check the environmental soundness, but this is something that you do not really need to worry about at this stage. But during the pre-award times, we'll have our consultants work with you on the mitigation if there is a requirement of it. And these are a few certifications that I spoke to you about earlier. A few expenses that we need to look and have them allocated accordingly, or we need to remove them. So for instance, the construction work or any work related to the renovation that needs to be on the grantee side. And if there is a need for working capital, it will not be regarded as PSI because that eventually get converted into your revenue. Since if you have got this important element or a prerequisite that you need to do some sort of construction or renovation, you can always include that into your side of implementation if that's doable within this time frame. And also there's and you can put other sustainable elements to the USAID side. So any cost related to celebrations and expenses are not eligible. Any sort of purchase of livestock, agricultural commodities are not eligible. If there is a need for some motorized vehicle, you can probably do that on your contribution or any PSI side of it. Any sort of telecommunication or video surveillance in like of CCTV cameras, please do not include that into the grant funding. Alcoholic beverages and purchase of goods and services from Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Syria because of not having a friendly relationship with the US, and other benefits for staff in terms of endowments are not should not be included in the budget. So these are some other instructions, but I'll just stop by the branding and marketing plan. So we will work with you at the time of pre-award risk assessment if you are selected to work on the branding and marketing plan, because every sort of development through the grant funding that needs to be properly marked and brand, and we have got a set of guidance on it. I have annexures with me, but in the interest of time, I'll first go to the question and answers. I'll ask Gulale if she could help.
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Sman, for this really, really detailed, and I think one of the most important presentations today, because this is something that a lot of questions were about. I would now just, go through the questions, and anybody from the IPA team or you or whoever wants to answer, they can. So I'm just putting my video off because there is a problem with the internet connection Pakistan-wide today, and I don't want to lose my audio while trying to set up my video. So Basically, there was, thank you all or to all our listeners, actually, before we can, start the Q&A. This is immense interest has been shown. And as we talk, more than 100 participants are online just to listen to this, opportunity about this grant, and also to know about all the development and economic empowerment stabilization work that USAID is doing. So really, thank you to all of you for taking out time. Some of the questions were about which policy did you support. It was, as I mentioned, this small and medium enterprises policy. There was a question about, is this grant available for SMEs from Balochistan? So yes, as Usman said, that it is a nationwide grant, so it is not restrictive to any area. And there has been a question on women-led criteria for businesses, so that has also been addressed by Usman's presentation. There is one question on, can one company apply for two different ideas with two different categories? So Usman or
Yes.
Farooq or anybody who would
Sure.
want to answer this.
Sure, yes, they can apply for multiple categories. So if there is a potential of sending out multiple grant application, be that on the US-Pakistan bilateral trade side or the FDI, they can do that. So the overall grant application, if the applicants would look on these templates, so that is designed in a way that if you are focused towards FDI grant, you just need to fill the questions for FDI. If you are focused on US-Pakistan trade grant, we have got another set of questions. And if you think that you will have both the potential, then you can fill both. So if you get multiple grant applications, all of them will be would get equal amount of attention in terms of evaluation, but at the time of award, we will be awarding just one.
Okay. So another question on, can sole proprietorship apply for this grant as well?
Yeah. So any legal entity, any legal organization in Pakistan can apply who can just align with the two core objectives of FDI and US-Pakistan trade.
Okay. Okay. And while Usman, you've already answered this, but this is such a repetitive question. So I just thought that if you can have a one-line clarity on this question, which talks about, is this amount a specifically grant amount, or is it an investment against equity, since it involves the FDI component? So can you please clarify?
This is actually just the grant amount. So you may have an overall requirement of investment for local investment to either get an FDI or to get the US-Pakistan trade linkages go. So we will buy down that risk of the total investment need that you have through the grant funding. So these grant funding will act as a catalyst to speed up the process, to expedite the process.
Okay. And another question, is this also for non-government organizations, or is it purely companies or, for-profit organizations?
So we need to see that they organize, because we need to, we actually want to increase the profitability of the company that is applying directly. So if a non-profit is applying, because their own profitability won't go high. So we need to have that social angle is good, but we are more focused on the commercial angle for it. So in terms of the FDI and US-Pakistan bilateral trade, if they can convince within the application that there is a trade or there is an FDI that will have some sort of equity and good profitability, then I think they'll be able to apply. But indirect attributions would not make a good case.
Okay. There is also a little, question on how is it different? How are the FDI grants, the specific grant, IPA one, different from US-Pak trade grants?
So in FDI, we are looking for the international investments for any organization that may come from anywhere of the world. But for the US-Pakistan bilateral trade, we are just focused on the bilateral trade of the two countries. So for instance, you may have an appetite of international funding that may be coming from a European country, that's fine. But in order to trade, there could be other organizations who have got trade potential with US-based counterparts. So that's why it's different. So one is investment versus trade. Yeah.
Okay, and there are a lot of questions on green initiatives and climate. So I guess Farooq and also Osman and even Stephen, they mentioned very clearly that gender and inclusion and climate change and green investments are cross-cutting themes for all. So I think that is one thing that we don't need to answer. It has already been mentioned repeatedly. But there's an interesting question on, are startups who have raised external funding, are they also eligible for this grant, or that?
Yes, they are. They are actually,
Okay.
because they
Okay.
may have more appetite to raise some more funds, but the investments and the PSI, the FDI or PSI needs to be within the effective period of the grant. If they have already raised an amount of funds, that will probably grade them on the higher ranking because of their previous performance, but the attributions will go after the grant amount is being awarded.
Okay. Okay, and Usman, there have been quite a few questions on the sectors, so I guess your presentation does cover the sectors, but there is a specific repetitive question on education sector. So it has to link with a US company working in a similar space. Is that true?
So yeah, so we are pretty much flexible in terms of sectors, because we know asking for international investments and FDI is a big ask, and also the US-Pakistan bilateral trade linkages. So we are open with sectors, but if they are working with the US counterparts as an ed tech, they need to have these kind of linkages so to apply for US-Pakistan trade grants.
Okay, and somebody was asking that, for example, what do you mean by this maximum shareholding? Like in US, it's 18%. So something on your presentation about shareholding.
So for the women-led businesses, we want that businesses needs to have maximum shareholding in the business led by the women as well. So she needs to be the owner and the leader.
Okay. Okay, so that I think answers, and education grants question has been answered. And this is a very tricky question, but they say that, is the governing body in Chemonics the final authority on it?
Yeah, so we have got a completely I would say independent process for the grants evaluation. It's not myself that I'll be evaluating the grant applications, or the team are here, but we get the grant applications evaluated based on evaluation criteria, and they actually recommend and score all of these applications. And yes, at the final stages, we need to see if our project indicators are being attributed well, and then we recommend this to USAID for award. So that's the overall process.
Okay, so Usman, thank you for doing all this talking for the whole hour. And I think
Sure.
a lot of people have the similar questions. So I just consolidated them to a few questions, and I hope those questions are answered. But most of them have asked for an email address, which they can for further, if they have any queries, if they have any information needs, what is a link that they can access, and what is the email address that they can work on.
Sure. So it's the IPA fund at pakistanipa.com. I'll just repeat that in the chat box as well.
Yeah. Also, I see Stephen getting an invitation from Karachi to, so somebody can host him. And
I saw that too.
Yeah,
I think the fund has gotten people excited.
Yes, exactly. And you know that we have got over 2,000 people registered for the in-person events that we have been holding. We had a tremendous attendance and highly engaging question and answer sessions over there. We still do have a couple of those events happening in Islamabad. That's on 23rd and 1st of September. So anybody who is interested, they can actually get themselves enrolled through the link.
Yeah. And also those who are asking for slides, I guess the recordings will be up around midday today, so everybody can access those slides as well. And this whole recording will also be uploaded. So if there are any no more questions, I would like to thank Stephen, Afsheen, Farooq, and Usman for taking out time today to be able to talk to all those participants and listeners who are really interested in how they can be apply for these grants. And especially Stephen, thank you for actually pointing out how these bilateral trade ties, how this economic reform work that is being done by USAID is actually leading to economic development, not just economic development, but other development in Pakistan in areas like agriculture, healthcare, education. So I guess that's the end of the conversation today for the webinar. Usman has already shared the email addresses and the links for everybody to be, if you have any further questions. And as they've said that they have further seminars and further engagements planned over till the 15th, I guess. So you just keep the social media handles, you can keep posted, the conversations posted there. And thank you everyone for joining, and thank you for taking out time despite this tricky internet situation in Pakistan today. I don't know why, what was the problem, but it's a nationwide issue today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.